380 ACP 90 grain battle. We're going to see how 3 different loads of 380 ACP with 90 grain bullets compare to each other. And I'm going to use my 3.68 inch M&P Shield EZ to do this test. And the reason why I'm doing this test is because one of these rounds I have never tested to that pistol, and I'm very curious about what we're going to get. And that round is the Hornady American Gunner. I've never tested that through this particular pistol, so shame on me on that, because that's a pretty popular round at a good price. So I want to see how 3 different rounds will compare. So we have our Speer Gold Dot 90 grain, we have our Federal Hydra-Shok 90 grain, and we have our Hornady American Gunner 90 grain. So our Speer Gold Dot is rated at 1,040 feet per second through a 3.75 inch barrel. Very similar barrel to what I'm using here. This is about a 3.7, so 3.75 inch. 1,040 feet per second is its rating. Our Federal Hydra-Shok, again, is rated through a 3.75 inch barrel, and that rated velocity, instead of 1,040, is 1,000 feet per second. Now our Hornady American Gunner, this again is rated at 1,000 feet per second, but instead of a 3.75 inch barrel, they're using a 4-inch barrel to achieve that velocity. Now those numbers may or may not play out that way. I've noticed a lot of times rated velocity is, you never know what you're going to get despite what they say. So we're going to see what we get here and see how all 3 of these compare. So we're going to go through the chronograph, see what kind of velocity and accuracy we get at the same time. Then I'm going to do my 10% clear ballistic test. We're going to go into plain clear ballistics to see what the best potential of those cartridges are. You know, no denim or fabric in the way to clog a hollow point. See if we get hollow point expansion, then move on to a real world simulation. So after our plain clear ballistic shot, we'll have 4 layers of sweatshirt material in this first 3-inch piece that represents our pectoral muscle. After that, a 1/4 inch medium density fiberboard to represent hitting ribs or sternum. So we will do a plain clear ballistic shot for our best potential, then a real world simulation shot with each of these rounds. Then I will shoot at the steel target to see what kind of practical accuracy and shootability I can get with these. So let's get started with this test. All right, first up we have our Speer Gold Dot. This is rated at 1,040 feet per second through a 3.75 inch barrel. Let's see how close I get to 1,040 feet per second in my M&P Shield EZ here. $927, 883, 909, 899, 915. So they were a little bit over optimistic with that velocity rating versus what I actually got. We are well over 100 feet per second lower. Now our Federal Hydra-Shok here, this is rated at 1,000 feet per second. Let's see what I get here. $989, 971, 990, 978, 980. So pretty good velocity, just a little bit below our rated, and our barrel length is just a little bit below the barrel they used to rate that. So that's pretty good overall. Now our Hornady American Gunner, this is rated at 1,000 feet per second, but through a 4-inch barrel. So let's see what we get here with our American Gunner. 930, 920, 877, 945, 898. So not particularly impressive for being rated at 1,000. We should not be, 100 feet per second below rated velocities just because I shaved off 1/3 of an inch of a barrel compared to their rated barrel they're using there. So not very impressive. However, the Hydra-Shok is pretty good for its rated velocity versus what we actually got. So let's set our ballistics gel block and see how these all compare. All right, our best potential shot in the plain clear ballistics, we're going to do our Gold Dot, then our Hydra-Shok, and then our American Gunner. In that order, we'll go into plain clear ballistics to see what the best potential is of these. So here is our Speer Gold Dot. Next up is our Federal Hydra-Shok. And last is our American Gunner. Let's go take a look. All right, so we got expansion with all these, but we got some pretty limited penetration with all these as well. Our first 3 inches, we'll take a look at our energy dump here. Bottom is our Gold Dot, middle is our Hydra-Shok, top is our American Gunner. Not a big difference there, maybe the most I would see with our Gold Dot. But once we get into the gel, it looks to me like the Federal Hydra-Shok has a little bit more tearing size going on. That's very similar to the Gold Dot. And our American Gunner is kind of low in the amount of ripping tearing size I see there. So our Speer Gold Dot, we have a penetration of about 10 3/4 inches of penetration. I know camera parallax will probably make it look like that's about almost 12 inches from the camera's angle, but we are at 10 3/4 inches with our Gold Dot. With our Federal Hydra-Shok, we have about 9.5 inches of penetration. And with our American Gunner, we have about 10 1/4 inches of penetration. So subpar penetration, but very consistent, for the caliber in this pistol. What I'm hoping now is that when we put on our fabric, which most attackers are wearing fabric, that will clog the hollow points just enough to get more adequate penetration. So let's try our real world simulation, see how these all compare. All right, our real world simulation, Gold Dot, Hydra-Shok, and American Gunner. Here's our Gold Dot. All right, here is our Federal Hydra-Shok. All right. Let's hit that with our American Gunner. Let's go take a look. All right, so I'm going to call a clear winner here. I don't have to tell you which one it is. That's the, you know which one it is. The American Gunner did a lot better. Interesting here, they all got expansion. It looks like probably the American Gunner got a little less expansion. But from this first 3 inches, it looks like they're all energy dumping quite well, even through that fabric. And the penetration numbers with our Gold Dot and Hydra-Shok actually haven't changed much versus our plain gel shot, but our American Gunner did. Through our rib simulation, here's our Gold Dot, here's our Hydra-Shok, and here is our American Gunner. It does look like probably the Gold Dot and the Hydra-Shok are a slightly bigger hole than that American Gunner, but they are all very, very similar. So it does look like they expanded in that first 3 inches, and that makes sense because it is a lighter bullet. So when it hits that, it's going to want to deform a little bit easier. So what we got going on here, very similar penetration with the Gold Dot and the Hydra-Shok, but subpar. With our Gold Dot, we have 10 1/4 inches with our Gold Dot. With our Hydra-Shok, it got a little bit of rollback, but I would say our penetration is closer to 10 3/4. So about a 1/2 inch more track there with our Hydra-Shok. Now our American Gunner, we went to an adequate penetration of about 15 1/4 inches of penetration. So this is that thing. I do think that with most shots, that this type of penetration past 10 inches is enough, because this is roughly a half representation for density of an attacker. We'll call him an attacker. So these would roughly give about 5 inches into an attacker, roughly from here to here, which is enough to hit vitals with the front-on shot. But if you were to take a shot that's kind of a side shot, the reason why the FBI, and this is not the FBI testing exactly, but the reason why they wanted 12 inches was to ensure that through an arm, through the side, that gave just enough penetration to hit something vital. So with these, we're not hitting that 12-inch penetration. So what we're seeing here, and I'm going to trust the real world simulation better than the best potential shot, simulation here, is our American Gunner is a better load overall choice. But the other two here, they would probably work. It's just not going to be a consistent choice for getting penetration. So interesting here. I thought they were all going to be exactly the same. I didn't think one was going to stand out, but one did. The one I have not tested in the past. Interesting. So let's pull these out of the block. We'll take a close-up look at them. Then I'll shoot our steel, see what kind of practical accuracy and shootability I can get with these. All right, so here's a close-up look at these bullets going through our plain gel. Here is our Speer Gold Dot. Here's our Federal Hydra-Shok, and here is our American Gunner. Our Speer Gold Dot did, the thing that gold dots like to do and expand out pretty well. Pretty big expansion. Nice looking bullet overall. Now our Federal Hydra-Shok, that actually expanded quite a bit bigger from what I'm seeing here. Really big expansion. And that's probably a lot bigger because it does have more energy, but because it has more energy, it could also penetrate to the same depths as that gold dot. So I would say, looking at our plain gel shot, this looks pretty impressive to dump that much energy like that and get that big. Our American Gunner seems to be close in size to the Speer Gold Dot. And we have decent expansion, but really more of a controlled expansion compared to a lot of bullets. So I'd say pretty good overall. Now we look at these bullets going through our rib simulation here. They have changed up. All of them have changed up a little bit. Our Gold Dot got just a hair smaller, but it still looks like pretty good expansion. Our Hydra-Shok got quite a bit smaller. I like to see that because that generally means you get more penetration, but it didn't get enough more penetration to matter. Our American Gunner got a lot smaller, and this is what I'm looking for. This is one of the hallmarks of a good 380, because you do want it to get smaller if it hits the ribs, and that's what it did. It got small enough to get deep penetration. And that's the trade-off you got to kind of live with if you do want more adequate penetration here. So all of them did okay, but I would say our American Gunner does have more of the attributes of a round that I would be looking for personal defense, because we know it can at least shrink down enough to penetrate deep if needed, or it can energy dump if it doesn't hit fabric. So I'd say our American Gunner is probably the best choice here. The second best choice I would say is our Hydra-Shok, because that had more energy, and there's real world data on that, and we have huge expansion, yet it still penetrated as far as the Gold Dot. Now our Gold Dot here, I'm just not impressed with it because we had so much below rated velocity and it just didn't perform that well. So American Gunner, Hydra-Shok, Gold Dot. It's a close-up look at those. All right, 12 yards from the target. I'm just going to see if there's a practical shootability difference with these, how they feel for muzzle rise and all that, and how quickly I can place them on target, see if there's really any difference between these. So first up, we have our Gold Dot. Let's see what this does for me. All right. Being a 380 and a bigger pistol, it does shoot pretty well. I did pull one kind of high there. There's our Federal Hydra-Shok. This one's more powerful though. Even though it's more powerful, it actually felt a little bit better for shootability. That's interesting because, with having nearly 100 feet per second more with the same bullet weight, you'd think there would be a big difference in the amount of recoil I felt, but I really didn't feel any difference at all with that Hydra-Shok. American Gunner here, let's see what this does for me. Alright, I'm going to say this has the least recoil out of those three. It just felt easier to land them on target quicker. Interesting. Let me back up a little bit. All right, 40 yards from the target. Gonna see if there's any real practical difference here with these. So here's our Speer Gold Dot, 40 yards. Let's see how this shoots for me. Not too bad. Federal Hydra-Shok. That shoots pretty good as well. Now we will try our Hornady American Gunner. You probably noticed I only have 2 magazines here. I really like this pistol. I should get some more. We have our Hornady American Gunner. Let's see how this does from 40 yards. Alright, just for fun, I'm going to try a headshot. I'll probably miss, but let's see what I can do. I focus. Pulled it just a hair above that target. I was thinking maybe they were shooting a little bit low, but they weren't. But overall, I would say all this ammo shoots really good in this pistol. And I really like this pistol. I've had this pistol for about 2 years. It's one of my favorite pistols. I actually do carry it from time to time when I'm going to do outside the waistband where I have something over it, because it's so thin and light, and it's easy to carry, and I feel very confident with it. It shoots really well for me. So looking at this, they all did pretty well. Now, when I have carried this in the past, my actual ammo choice has been the Federal Hydra-Shok. And the reason for that is because even though I do my own ballistic testing a lot, and I try to come to conclusions a lot with, you know, how different loads perform, I still sometimes gravitate towards that old Sonau and Marshall stopping power chart where it shows different loads. And pretty much the only load on there of these 3 that I have, or really most of the loads out there, are the Hydra-Shok, and it shows the Hydra-Shok performing quite well. So I've been carrying that when I do carry it, but I might have to reconsider, because if we're going to have less recoil and better penetration and all of that, and it's going to be just as accurate with the American Gunner, and it's a really cheap ammo, well, I should probably get that, because that is one of the cheapest ammos out there, and it's performing quite well. I think it's like $18 for a 25 round box a lot of times, which is pretty affordable for 380 ACP, because you could use that as your target ammo or your carry ammo, and I think it would do pretty well here. So I may have to reconsider what I'm carrying. Now, Gold Dot, you know, the Gold Dot performed about as well as the Hydra-Shok here. However, that rate of velocity was absolutely terrible. You know, why is it showing at 1,040 and it's getting like 100 feet per second or over 100 feet per second less? At least with that Federal Hydra-Shok, that makes sense. It's rated at 1,000 through a barrel that's just a hair longer, and we're getting just a hair less than that. And, you know, energy does matter to some degree. So I do think, even though we saw the same performance in the gel with the Gold Dot and the Hydra-Shok, I think that in a real situation, that Hydra-Shok, that extra energy, could, you know, account for a little bit better stopping power. But our American Gunner here, clear winner here, because we're getting assured penetration. So I do think 380 ACP is a good cartridge. If you look at the other data by Greg Ellifritz, what it shows there is that as a whole, 380 ACP is roughly as effective as 38 Special or 9mm even, and the failure to stop a threat rate is pretty similar. It's only when you go to like 32s and stuff like that where you have a, you know, greater chance that a shot's going to land and not stop that threat. But people will often take the 380 and they'll equate that to the 380 and say, oh, the 380 is just not going to stop a threat. Or they'll pull out outlier circumstances where this person was shot 8 times with the 380 and it didn't stop them. Well, you could find stories of that, outlier stories with 357 Magnum. It's good to look at the data and look at, you know, is this a good cartridge overall to carry? I think it is. And, you know, with the right load, I think it's even better than that. So enough rambling here. I think 380 is a fantastic cartridge because you get a lot of what you're getting with 38 and 9mm, but you're getting it with half the recoil if you're shooting it in a good sized pistol. So that's what you get today. So as always, comment, share, and like, and thanks for watching.